So the next thing that I had planned to talk to you guys about was this was a note that I posted when they had the April 8th last year eclipse across North America. That was the X eclipse, a judgment to a country where there's not just an eclipse, but there's an X eclipse. There was a lot of theorizing on that, like a letter of the Hebrew alphabet that may have spelled out, or that a similar eclipse had just come through Nineveh. So Jonah, when he came to Nineveh, his testimony was more powerful because they were already looking at something like that. And then people pointed out things like we had repealed some of the abortion laws, so maybe we would have a lighter judgment if it meant judgment. And once more, I'm wondering if 3 years later, on 2027, that's whenever we'll see North America like this. What didn't mean that necessarily we were going to be bombed or come under war immediately. This was before I had started looking at my dream of Trump and 34 moons or anything like that. But I was just kind of wanting to remind people of like where we've come. Back to our discussion of groups that plan and name things, groups that are moving the world toward a certain way. You can see a lot of that, not just since 9/11, not just since early 2000s, but you can see a lot of it. And also to share, like in my lifetime, like where the recent globalist movement has brought us. And it's funny, like to be the ages that I was as these possible seals were unrolled. Like the 90s was like a big globalist movement, and I have not, like, I want to go through some of the things I noticed in the world, but I haven't caught them all. I'm realizing now, like with world events being like more popular and more studied, I'm realizing I have missed things that happened like in the Far East that I would be so like remotely removed from. I'm missing some of the cycles, some of the things that have happened. But like in the 90s, like when I was coming up, and then how I would be a young adult as the 2000 events happened, and then I was a maturing adult coming into more maturity as we hit the 2010 cycles. And then now I'm where I'm at today during these cycles. So I think it's just interesting to be, there's a lot of us that are this age while we're watching these cycles come on the earth, and we can recognize what they are and see them, how it's like coincided with my life. But I'll probably just read through some notes that I had made. I was planning to share a study of events that started in 2020. These events specifically moving us toward cashless and a score system worldwide, like this AI tech that's going to be like the power behind the scales. And so I realized I need to go back to a first decade cycles that began in New York in 2001, September. And the study would be incomplete without looking back at globalist movements since the 90s. Because a lot of what we're seeing today, like with the trade situation and tariffs, is trying to undo what the bad things that started in the 90s. So here I'm beginning my study of moving into cashless by looking at the tech pushes with spiritual backdrop in the 90s. Just scratching the surface, I bet. This is a good reminder how different things are, that how different. This is something that I appreciated from this study. Things were so different not that long ago. We have forgotten. So we've come so far so fast by design. To appreciate this study, you need to understand the changes of the 90s were a gateway, right? The 70s and the 80s, the 60s was a massive breakdown of civilization, like on purpose, right? That was a plan. That was another big plan. So that was a destruction of a lot of things and bringing in a lot of spiritism and mind alterings. And I may speak in code for some of these words because it's going to be a lot of words dropped if I don't. So the 90s were a gateway. And if you go with the theory that things being so planned, the 90s would have been planned right before the 2000s. And this was a globalist gateway that coincided with an increase of technology. So life and lifestyles in the 70s and 80s being very modern and a lot of technology, but then compared to the 2000s, it's going to be different. Without technology, internet, and phones being set up the way that they are, the way that they were, it would not have been possible to move into the controls that have been planned for the 2000s, the 2000 millennium. In the 1990s, the stage was being set to make it possible to move the world quickly into a single government economy and religion. Yeah, they were seeing its go time. Some of the like facts of history, some of them are directly related to like this is how and why things change so fast, so hard toward globalism and what we see today. But other parts of this are more like just like a reminder of, oh wow, that was a technological shift at that time and things like that. So informative purposes. So first we'll look at the political, technological, and economic shifts of the 90s. So, and I just went like in chronological order because it just seemed the simplest. In 1990, you had, and this also was like a good reminder of like what changed when, of how, oh man, we have changed a lot. We changed a lot real fast. 1990, the Hubble Space Telescope that was launched, and that was to monitor and control information of the powers of heaven being shaken, I believe. The different space programs were watching the things of space. There could be some benefits for the common person, but a lot of times I think these benefits were for the world system to be able to know like what's coming, where it's at, because they've been told things are coming. You guys probably already know about the post World War II science that was originated in sorcery. So once more, the science is the black magic because they're being informed, instructed, and know to be looking for certain things like powers of heaven shaken, and sure enough, these powers of heaven shaking has been increasing. In the prophecy, it says, "For the powers of heaven shall be shaken." I believe they're already shaken. That's why there's the increase of earthquakes that was also prophesied. And I believe it will culminate into the sixth seal cataclysm, and that's what we're watching. Also in 1990, Walmart becomes America's number one retailer. In 91, you have a Soviet Union so called falling. Cold War is over, and a new era of Russian politics can theoretically be more globalist and less isolated. Or they were bringing everyone in. The internet really started connecting everything. Like Mike says, there's not really borders theoretically like it was because everybody's just right up in each other's face, even. There was this idea of pulling everyone into being engaged directly so that they could be controlled that way more. So that was their version of coming into globalism, like in the Far East. And we had a version of entering economically into what was unthinkable, like letting China become a huge trade partner. At the time, that was just ridiculous. Now it's like, of course you do. It's survival. Anyway, 91 Iraq Gulf War. This was where, and you had the first Bush that started this and didn't go, but so far, that's where I saw that the West first began to engage the East. Like that was the beginning. Not only was like the whole world becoming connected, interacting, we've got to set up for World War III, we've got a lot of moves to do in there in between. That was where the East and the West first was like. Before then, it didn't seem like there was much engagement that was direct, that brought in all the populaces of the people emotionally, mentally, even economically. There was like all these rumors of the Babylon, Gilgamesh, Nimrod artifacts being seized for information and power. And this was the beginning of the setup for your future prophetic wars. Even before I realized this Albert Pike letter of how we're going to make sure the Zionists and the Islamists are fighting. This was these future prophetic wars that you read about with Israel in the Bible. So 91, G.H.W. Bush, he first used the term New World Order publicly. Him and his son used a lot of like spiritist terminology of an angel and a whirlwind and different ones. But he used that in the State of the Union. I think that was kind of like the buzzword. That may have been their attempt at having a meme or a discussion topic, or the secret groups were talking to each other. But a lot of people made a big deal about it. You've heard different Kissinger, different people talking about this. So this is what I call the middlemen, even though the first GHWB was like a higher middleman, of course. but like his son would have been a middleman, even Kissinger to a degree. Anybody that we know their names probably are like the ones who are being told a lot of lies and kept in the dark, are being led around by the nose. 91, Hamas becomes militant and challenges PLO authority, future prophetic wars. 92, U.S. enters NAFTA agreement, which engages world economies, so we can all be manipulated and together, not decentralized. Canamex has proposed, which is Canada, U.S., Mexico, as possibly one of the final 10 kingdoms. This is the talk of the Amero, like the Euro. So they've tried where they could, y'all. There's been efforts where they could get away with it to do these experimental kingdoms, 10 socioeconomic regions. In 1999, they were talking about the Amero and the NAFTA superhighway. In 1995, there was a war in Texas that shut down the NAFTA superhighway. I think that was going to go through Canada, Texas, and up through to Canada and Mexico. So, 92 and 96, Ross Perot ran for president. He's exposing this globalism and the Uniparty. And he split the Republican vote, so Clinton became president. 93 to 2001. And so there was a lot of globalism. A lot of globalism was happening through that family. If you know, you know, is what I put there. There was a lot of things that they did. Yes. So, 93 was the don't ask, don't tell policy at the military. Also, the EU was created, which was an experiment of the major socio-economic region of 10 kings under the Antichrist of Revelation 17, 12 through 13. The euro was agreed to in 95 and launched in 99. So this was actually done, I guess, at the time that they were thinking about the Amero, but they actually did this one. So 93, World Wide Web, guys. Do you know what WWW stands for? 666. It was launched as available to the public, invented in 89 at CERN, of all places. What do you know? So that was around the 90s, too. And you hear different politicians come out and brag that they invented the internet. I'm not going to name names, but I would say the ones who came out and just bragged I invented the internet they were they were part of a secret group. That's what they're exposing. They were part of a group. There was a think tank that invented it. They're proud of that and they want to brag, but they can't really so without exposing themselves. So, mid to late 90s, do you guys remember when you first got a cell phone? Mid to late 90s, mobile phones first became more commonly used by everyday citizen. That's this little chunky phone that could fit in your whole hand. Okay. So as internet, satellites, and mobile phones became more accessible to everyone, business information, mind control, and TERR grew exponentially to the point where it's hard to imagine how the world was before that. What do we do? How are we safe driving long distances, even? 94, FDA approves the first GMO food in the U.S. And the first ones in China were a few years earlier. This was 94. And the Gates Foundation was established by the billionaire in 94. It hasn't been here for 100 years. That was 94. Interesting. So he began donating computers, how wonderful, to public libraries, and the agenda to push the internet to every home, business, and classroom. And if you look into tech geniuses and billionaires of the past few decades, you will see occultism somewhere in their family, in rumors, just like the Tesla idea with his mother, that they were channeling things. And Mike from Around the World also talks about how a lot of these people will reach out somewhere with seances or something like it, rituals, and that's how they get information and instruction for technology. That's where we get a lot of technology, just saying most of it. And I believe even since Einstein's day, that's how it's been. And we're told that these people are so smart. Like I was laughing with a friend the other day, like used to be, before it was obvious that these were scams. We could be sold on coaching programs where if you just coach yourself to be so disciplined and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and work super hard and do sit-ups and go running for 4 miles. And then if you get up and you discipline yourself and study right and get a certain degree and all this, you're going to be just like Steve Jobs or whoever these people are. You're going to be just like a billionaire CEO. You can be just like them. They're not telling you they're in a family. They're given lots of money to look over. And they're given lots of money to fund projects to work for these groups that are becoming the power groups. Like Richie from Boston was saying that these sciences are actually um, black magic, and that you didn't hear how their mother would do rituals until she was automatic writing, and she would write formulas into a book and teach it to you since she was a child. So that's what you really have to do to be so-called successful, is manage the money and have the tech. And anyway, these people are not what we're told. We're given these little romantic, wonderful, amazing, idealistic stories, how great and heroic they are. So you will see occultism, and it's not really a coincidence of their fame and their power in the world. And we're told that they were really lucky, they worked hard, they were geniuses, and some of them were like, some of them I think are like really smart, work hard, and willing and careful, and then they're recruited and given the money and stuff. Maybe that kind of happens too sometimes, but many times there's literal black magic going on. 95 to 99, Gates were recognized as Forbes' richest person in the world. 94 to 95. One last thing I'll say about Gates is how interesting that he was so fascinated with jabs and computers. And now the World Economic Forum is bragging about how they're going to take over in this decade, is they're going to do virus to the body and virus to the computer system or the internet. Their number one ways of taking over. And this guy is like directly involved and invested in both of those. 94 to 95, that's when you had your 24-hour news cycle comes to cable news channel. And I remember seeing it escalate after 2001. And I think some people have pointed out that the Iraq situation was whenever it first had the reason to, and it stepped up and was really starting to be pushed. That was all mind control and information control. So I remember wondering, why is this necessary? Like all day long, really? Why? And it felt so weird. And that was almost like the only thing really on cable, I think. It's like, what? Because I was in a situation of a little apartment where it was just automatically allowed. So if I ever turned on TV, that was one of my options. I was like, really? But I was always interested in the news. But I was like, why would you play the same thing? Because you guys know how it cycles. Like if you sit there for 15 minutes, a lot of times you're literally watching the same people. They've become more creative in making different shows with different actors. I mean reporters, but it's the same thing over and over. I was like, do now I know the need for that for 24-hour was mind control. That was going to be needed. They knew that there was going to be needing to be massive mind control over the whole populace, and they have some that's targeted to each person. Like part of the reason why I think that they have all the different kinds of movies and sitcoms and fantasy shows is to catch all the different kind of appetites out there of what your pet fantasy would be. And people wonder about like the narcissist rage in episode, but if you look at the like psych DSM definitions of narcissism, it includes in there a major addicted to a pet fantasy. So there's a lot of things going on. Um, Mind control, and I'm not saying you're evil if you have a TV as much as I'm saying you might want to, especially if we're a few years from the pale horse, you might want to turn it off some more than you have been, and turn on more Bible than you had been, or call somebody, or be more active and some kind of dedication, some kind of a productivity or anything. I noticed a lot of people have anyway. They're productive and they're not. They're being forced to be more productive just from the economy. So 95 was World Trade. WTO was founded, World Trade Organization, and they were having the protest by 99. People were automatically like, this is not good. You had, in 96, you had a Defense of Marriage Act, ironically signed by Mr. Bill. That just lets you know what the social movements had become. So, 96 to your later 90s, you had Air Force first reports as being accused of regular weather modification, which is the trailing, over the U.S., although it was used in Vietnam and other places. By the early 2000s, when more people were complaining of diseases and side effects, it was covered up as a hoax. Now they're just out kind of saying it, but you know what, guys? For decades, it wasn't. It was people's imagination, and it never happened. They could find it though in legal documents and legislation, and so I believe it's done for many reasons. Many reasons, and I think some of them are actually somewhat beneficial. From the powers of heaven shall be shaken. They're trying to figure out ways to kind of shield people and shield the world from, I mean, some people thought it was necessary or sold it as necessary because there has been a lot of radiation changes and issues from the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So, at first, though, it first started being shown in the skies in the 90s. And to me, all this study just helps you see how this has shifted from the 90s into the 2000s. Then by the time it's 2010, it was go time and crunch time. Push, 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 push. These agendas, because here it comes. So this prophecy of the powers of heaven shall be shaken has been covered up. A lot of the news has covered up prophecy and sold it as evolution or man made issues or anything else in the world. This one has been covered up as climate change. And the climate change idea, once more, coined terms, was first introduced in the late 80s, which is almost the 90s. So, in 96 was the first time they let us know about the cloned sheep. The Taliban seized Kabul, Soviet troops withdrew, and this just goes into like more of the setup for the future wars. You had headquarters of so-called the Laden character declared fatwa against the U.S. and the Al Qaeda is formed headquarters. This would be an important part of coming prophetic wars and a precursor to other groups that were what we read earlier was the nihilists, and to do certain political moves violently on the ground, boots on the ground. They probably have covert words for this stuff that we've never heard, like the organized protesting in North America. Also, 98, you had your cooperation agreement with NOOK Lear programs to control and weaken and compromise the world's militaries to a common secret platform, probably, most likely. 99, you had InfoWars founded by AJ, and the world is also being prepared for Y2K panic because now computers have become enough of a thing that it's time to consolidate and control computers in people's lives and how that works with us. So now I'm going to go through the 90s, how you had the narrative, since we have technology to control people's minds about these things. This is probably the beginning of the nihilist behavior, by the way. TERR activities escalate for an important narrative of controlling into the new millennium. And these were the dry runs. What I'm about to explain to you was probably like the dry runs in the beginning, and it allowed laws to be passed at different levels. Because a lot of times people are like, why are they allowed? Why is that even happening? And sometimes there's different things that legally or practically have to happen at different levels between different groups that are working 24/7 real time in those areas that we never see or notice until we're shown. We're like, oh, that's kind of why they did that, and why it's taken a minute, and why they're having to take certain steps first, and things like that. So these narratives can also be increasingly presented to the public, and this includes levels of criminality being escalated. So some of these seem to succeed and some seem to backfire or fail. In 92, you had LA riots. This is not that long ago. These were the 90s when you first had the globalism and the big pushes. 93 was the WTC BMBING, the echo of what would come in 2001. This is why people like Alex Jones was saying if they're doing it, they're going to hit New York and they're going to go for them towers, is because it had already been done before, and when it did, it was a optic. It was a good psyop. So they were like, That's how they're going to do it, and they're going to blame it on their globalist boogeyman, which I just read about a lot. And these things become predictable when you know what you're looking at. So yes, AJ predicted the events of New York in 2001. He predicted it the month before. Predicted, you know what I'm saying? 93, you had the Waco siege, which was a government overreach. 95, you had Oklahoma City, which some people told me that's when they woke up and realized what was up, because that was obviously that was a planned staged event. In case you guys didn't know, and there's been documentaries about it. 99 was the Columbine situation. That is kind of like a Ted Bundy marker to let everybody know where we were. I don't think that was conspirized and came up with and planned. That let people know kind of like where we were as a culture. That's what the music had done. That's what your social and cultural Marxism programs had done to the youth. The Ted Bundy marker was kind of like a spit in the face of the 60s movement of we're so proud, we're so pridefully fleshly. We have evolved. We have technology that can fly airplanes and have color TV. So we have arrived. So we can be lawless and we can throw the Bible away and laugh at God. And as a people and as a people group, we're becoming more and more evolved and advanced away from these old, uh, archaic, negative, terrible things. Well, here comes along Ted Bundy and things like it, sadly, the whole time to just kind of remind people. I think that's kind of what that was of you're not evolving. This is a warning flag. You're probably devolving. Yeah. So I think that's kind of what Columbine was. There was just a general increase of lawlessness and crimes. And then in the spiritual and entertainment realm, these studies are why I refuse to continue my secular and seminary studies into a graduate level degree. That has just becoming, I did, I even prayed about getting my doctorate in ministry or counseling, and it was going to become increasingly irrelevant, wasteful, or censored. And it's why God showed me what time we're in. There's others like me. There's many others like me. And so what God led me on a path there was just to meet the like-minded people. It's kind of like there's been a war in my life to, God wants me to be used in this way and to meet and grow the other people who are like-minded so they can also have their own entire lives of reaching that many people also. It's not just me and not about me. That's why I did conferences. That's why I did political activities. And all this time, there have been thank you, God, for deliverance from these people. The entire time that I have been blessed and working and growing and meeting amazing people in groups, amazing, amazing blessings, I have also been threatened in ways I've never shared, like publicly. Threatened, harassed, targeted, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, in the strangest ways, in the most obvious ways. And you guys know, I think that I'm talking to people we've lived through these same times, and I think this has happened to a lot of people. So the things that I would want to share, if I even ever have time to, are things that I believe a lot of people have gone through. And like my insights and my thoughts and my experiences will probably help others in the way that others have helped me. But it's been the wonderful on one hand, and on the other hand, it's been I have been attacked. I have been attacked. It's not just this man that hit me on 9/11. I have been hit by one woman tried to traffic me in 2012. A few different churches tried to harass me because I wouldn't obey and worship their leadership. I just left. This is a long time ago. I'm talking about 2010 time range. This happened. And then groups on the internet, when I tried to share certain truth, the groups on the internet spiritually attacked me in a way that my poor little kitty cat, she could see things attacking me and I couldn't. She always would sleep right up here on my head, and suddenly she would not be in the same room with me. And then she ended up, one day I was working, I had a terrible feeling, and I was about to text my mom, is everybody okay? I came home, she had died, and I'm convinced I had been having these feelings. Now I knew what it was, I could pray against it, and it stopped. And this was back in mid 2010 decade. that she was being that was a hit in the spirit, and things like that happen. And my little kitty, my pet. And then I mean, I've just had all kinds of weird people trying to end and stop and gossip and smear and slander and whatever. Perilous times shall come. I'm sharing because I know you guys have went through a lot too. And it's just funny how I mostly want to tell the drama stories as lessons, but there's also been wonderful stories. The people that you met along the way that were like awesome friends and helpful, and people who were genuine and tried and cared, and people who got attacked too, people who went through bad war. So yeah, there's it's just amazing, amazing times. So, and it's really weird. I have this strange feeling like I'm either me, like I sort of was like called into this journey 2008ish, and I believe the Lord had been using me like this for many years in different ways, but to the point where I was called deeper and I was called into more sacrifice and willingly and consciously following the Lord in this way was like 2008. And so from that time till now, I feel like I'm either at a halfway point or I'm getting past the halfway point of that. That I feel like I'm telling my life stories. And that, like, because, there's just not, it's worth it to follow the Lord. Please, please follow the Lord. It's never too late because of like what time we're in. So I was reading to you here about of how studying all this, like I was in college whenever like was called, and that led me to change. Starting to study how the world really was led me to change my life plans and just follow wherever the Lord was leading me and start preparing for what's coming. And I've drastically changed my life in a lot of ways to prepare for what's coming. And that's one of the reasons why I stopped my wasteful college studying at the time. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily for everyone. God may have you at college for a reason if you're there. But I stopped my master's and everything because I was like, this is not what I'm supposed to do, is to put more resources into the wasteful lying again and censorship and harassment. I started sharing these kind of studies since 2013. I started with a blog, and then 2017 is when I had my first real YouTube channel, and that led into like being attacked in 2020. 9/11 of 2020, I was attacked as a sign. God used it as a sign, and as much as I can be weak and fallible and human and silly and wrong in a lot of ways, I believe I had a certain dedication level, and there's a lot of people like me in these times. I'm convinced. The Bible says there will be a lot of people clothed in white that came out of a great tribulation. But a certain dedication level, and it's in my family, and the interest to study these things and to stick with the truth and to have a lot of this I consider it to be handed down to me. So I inherited this. I inherited the old King James Bible, things like that, truths, and understanding. So a lot of this I have to just be like, I need to be super responsible with this, not prideful and say I did it. I didn't even do it. So that's all the reasons why I believe I was used for the sign like this, a sign. There's a lot of signs these days. So the entertainment aspect started many years before the 90s. Like I said, you had the 60s counterculture revolution. They pushed the drugs and the rock and roll movement and the loose movement and into the baby boomers. And I guess they had just come from like a world war and a depression, so they had to find some other way to majorly control the populace and shape them into the. Remember, part of the Antichrist movement wasn't just the world wars; it was the Spiritism. Take down the old paradigm of Jesus, move in Spiritism, so that and then move in trauma, so people will be ready to accept the Antichrist. One of the things I've noticed how they do these strategies is they're not going to successfully do this on everyone. Maybe not even on the majority. They just need a certain percent. And it's a war, and they're trying to get as many people, you know, lost and undone as they can. But they just need that certain percent to make the optic look right on their medias of look at how much support we have, be intimidated and give up and believe that we have the legitimacy and whatever. And this is how much support there is. And of course, there's not any major lack of support except from crazy people. So they just need a certain percentage to make it look and seem a certain way, and then they're going to force and push their way anyway. That's how that really works. So the population explosion was supposed to carry the new religion to the Antichrist generations. By the way, I think this is a lot more deep than I even know. I wish I knew all the ways that they pushed in this Antichrist movement, especially with the churches. That may have been one of the most hidden warfares that they did, and planning and all that. I wish I knew more about that. Maybe I should look into it more and get myself into more trouble. Take down the old paradigm of Jesus Christ, bring in Eastern mysticism and self and the flesh, and once people accept the new spiritism to a percentage, they will be sufficiently demoralized and subverted to accept anything. And it isn't just an ideology, guys. It isn't just a mental acknowledgement of people like to get nitpicky with rules like I'm not going to do tarot cards, and I'm not going to do angel cards for Christians, and I'm going to have this Bible version, and I'm going to you know, I'm going to have these certain things that I do or don't do, and and it's good to do a lot of those things, but it's not just that. It's also what they call the flesh, the world, and the devil, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the passions and prides of life, and of the mind too. That the lust of the flesh that war against the soul is just as important as any ideology, and the enemy knows that. The lust of the flesh that war against the soul, it needs to be like a vigilance, a constant vigilance. That is spiritism. That is the spiritism. That is the Antichrist doctrines. That's like the witch who attacked me. It's like symbolic of the Antichrist spirit. He was what I had been calling since before he attacked me. One of the things is an enemy of the cross. He was an enemy of the cross because it was always about him. And if it couldn't be about him, then he was angry and hateful towards it. And that's what it means to take up your cross and follow the Lord, even if the Lord is saying leave the pulpit or leave it for a while because you're turning it into an idolatry, or do it differently. Sell some things you have and give to the poor. Stop taking, give to the needy and the hungry or whatever. I'm not saying that's the only thing he could have done better, as much as it was always about him and his agenda, status, title, role, position, ego, dominance. Demonically, though, he didn't really have any control over surrendering that. But that's an enemy of the cross. That's the belly is their God. It's about their decisions, their comfort, their luxury, their pet passions and prides and lusts, the lusts of the flesh that war against the soul. It doesn't always have to be drugs, sex, and rock and roll. It can be the favorite fantasies, or just an extreme kind of a selfishness and a passion. And we all are going to have things until we die. But as far as listening to the Lord, being willing and being different and being willing to say no and say, come out from among them and be separate. So that, and what I'm trying to say is the backdrop of all of the moving in of the Antichrist. We can't just sit here and blame a government system or banking or this particular sorcerer that came in with lots of money and changed the government or gave us computers. That's good to know, but just as important is our own personal. Are we an enemy of the cross? Do we make our belly our God? That's targeted. That's what's targeted by the technology too, is to try to make people more weak this way. And these are lost understandings, lost arts, and lost truths too. And that's the number one reason why a lot of people will accept a lie and will accept a false system, is it doesn't fit in. The truth and the true systems and the true faith does not fit in with their flesh and their self. So they can't accept it, so they have to go to the alternates, and the alternates don't work. So then it becomes a bitterness cycle because it's not working. But that's how that works. These are the mechanisms. These are the mechanisms of the atheism and what they're called the atheism and the spiritism to control people so that they will be completely prepared to accept whatever they're given as better. And this is the Antichrist generation. So my original studies of the Antichrist move of the end times really go back about 150 to 170 years. That's what I've been saying. The establishment of end times entertainment, education, and the other influential and power system. I noticed real changes in the United States churches around the year 2000. I believe this could be studied more and there would be information on agendas, meetings, schedules, programs, kind of like the private meetings that we hear about today. There were private meetings somewhere about. There were books that were written, formulas that came out, how to grow your church into being popular and famous and soft and what people are looking for, and don't make them feel bad about what I just said about comforting the flesh, making their belly their gods, and these systems. And there are now genuine churches that can still have some Holy Spirit ministering there, and truth taught, and souls saved, and baptisms that follow some of these errors and leavens that are not completely sold out to them, but it's just a whole bend. It's a bend and a formula and a strategy against the church. But you can bet there are names, dates, places, funding to change the Christian music, movies, churches, pastors, seminaries. Seminaries is a big battlefield for putting in some error. Literature to influence an extreme, drastic change seen in the church and in the worship and in the culture of the church. And these ministers on the internet and cable, uh-uh. The ministers that they have on the internet and cable, I'm trying to think if I even know a good one. I would just be safe and stay away from them as much as possible. But this information on the agenda part has been kept very secret. In my memory, the first pop Christian music was very bad. It seemed to me like it was the first pop music that they put out there to see what they could, like, to get the real talent to come so they could make it better later. And they didn't have the best. It was like the prototypes. They didn't have the best stuff out there first. It was just really hard to listen to some of it. And I was trying to worship, and I was like, what's wrong with me? And later on I realized it wasn't me. It was that kind of thing was not even real. Couldn't really feel the Lord, and it was just all weird, and the environment was different, and um I was doing a lot of changes in my life at that time, so I was going to different areas. So I was in a completely different area that now had these strange new church environments and music, and it was just all weird. But anyway, now the artists have become better, and some of them are actually even good, and you can even worship with some of it. So I believe more people came along and joined the new music, and some real things are there now. It's not just all fishy. Like some entire music movements seem like they're very infiltrated and spiritist, and a lot of the songs appeal greatly to the flesh and lusts. Like if you were just in love or in infatuation with someone, you could listen to that music and it would be about them. So I've wondered how many people are in the church singing these songs and thinking about their boyfriend or girlfriend, literally. And that's what it's designed to do. You're not coming to church and it's about the Lord, because it's different music that's separate, that's only with you and the Lord, that builds this whole realm that's with Jesus and worship and angels. And it's not about that. It's designed to keep you in the world. Once you enter the church, you're in the same realms you walk in every day, and you don't have a chance to escape anything that's going on with flesh and mind and lust and power or pride or none of that. And then there's all these chances for celebrity, because the music and the preaching atmosphere and the bigness of the numbers and the talents and the skills and all this, there's nothing wrong with any, that by itself. But it's set up to where it's easier to make celebrity. And that's a trap, and that's a leaven, and that's even an idolatry. It's different. And then some of the music is even singing about the Antichrist. There's one that the resurrected king is resurrecting me. And that one's about Phoenix rising from the ashes. It's all occultish kind of, and I don't think they say Jesus one time in it, and it feels weird, and it just feels. And I'm not the only one that said that that song don't feel right at all. And it's all about this resurrected king. And I'm like, is this ushering this Antichrist? And then another one is about draw me deeper into the waves. And I don't think that one even really talks about the Lord or Jesus. It's all about some spiritual experience that you're supposed to get emotional and caught up in the experience and the song and the music and draw me deeper into this water. And if you look in Revelation, these beasts come out of the water. It's just like, no. No, another thing while we're on the topic. Guys, a tip and a trick that I would give for the apocalypse for the believer and the things we'll go through is worship music, yes, but sometimes, particularly and especially old hymns, there's a lot of tips and tricks, really, I've learned, especially being attacked this hard. But them old hymns, I hope that you have had a chance to get attached to some of them old hymns if you've been in the church culture. That, some of them old hymns and the way that the Holy Spirit will minister to you, that's going to be a really big, that's going to be an answer to some of these things that are just impossible, overwhelming. Those are very much inspired and anointed by God. So I would say at least have you an old hymnal around, if not some CDs. And there's even still some good, in America, there's still some good radio programs that play the old hymns mostly. And I believe that there's people that are deliberately giving to that ministry to keep it on air, because even though they don't necessarily preach everything that everyone agrees with all the time, like about the end times or something, they're ministering with those old hymns because there's a lot of power in that. So one of the important changes that came to all of the music recently, in since this revolution of the late 1800s, has been the electronic part of the music. Instruments, sounds, mixers, bands, I guess you could say auto tune, and it becomes sorcery. There's a lot of sorcery. The other day I was explaining to someone how this country music singer, he was really good, and of course everybody knows that studies this, that the enemy can buy the top talent. Really good guitarist, keyboard, drums, and it sounded really appealing to the flesh, and I think the name of the song was actually something about sweet poison or favorite poison, and I'm like, that's very fitting, because that's what the music was. And I'm not harping and jealous or hateful or bitter or nothing about it, as much as I have been able to see. I'm like a mama in the culture. I can see how certain ingredients were planted. Like before I stopped watching movies and TV shows and stuff, long before that, about 10 years before that, I stopped listening to country music because I could feel it was straight poison. All it did was feed on my emotions and draw my emotions and make my emotions a certain way all the time, and to try to draw me into these states of sadness or sweetness or weakness, really. It was poison all the time. And I was like, that does not give you a relaxed, and I know people are just different in their makeup anyway, their constitution. But to me, the country music never gave me a time to be, peaceful, calm, joyful, healthy, whole, wholesome. That was poison. That was a long time ago, too. So now you can imagine. But I was trying to explain to these people how this is sorcery. People don't see it that way. They see it as even very talented and to be admired, and it's straight sorcery. And especially the way that the celebrities present themselves and how they live their lifestyle. That's a tale. Just these are things that sometimes, like, I'm not hating or preaching at people to get away from it, as much as I'm giving them permission to get away from it. encouragement, hope, and permission. Because a lot of times I feel like I need permission because I feel like I'm going too far, I'm being too much, I'm being ridiculous, I'm going to be skewed, I'm not going to match. But this is permission to be healthy. You know, it's okay. You're not the only one. These things can be very bad. You can even connect the dots between certain ingredients like this to like an increase in people even unaliving themselves. Because we don't appreciate that not everyone's the same. And there's certain percentages of the population that are going to be very weak to a lot of these things and vulnerable. And that's okay. It's not like they're deliberately that way or they're just more evil somehow or deserve to be punished. They're weaker and they're going to be more susceptible to substances, addictions, and the movie and the music influence that will tell them the lie, and they won't be able to see it, or they won't be able to realize that even what I'm feeling is a lie. And there's a lot of ways that people can just be better. And I feel like when I see these systems and how they've been planted here, I feel like people are not being given a chance. And so I wish there were voices like mine everywhere, giving people that chance back. You can be healthy. There is something way different. It don't have to be this way all the time. If you could only see the things that were planted against you and know how to kind of resist them till you get strong enough to really resist them, kind of deal. The coaching to have something better and have a chance and have faith and have things that work and things that are rich and truly wealthy. So one of these tools and weapons against people has been the electronic and its ability to influence people with the music and the entertainment and to mass produce it. The phone would be like a typical example of the most massest production, the most availability. But you've had radio, video, cable, internet, now phones. So technology makes it to where music is already a powerful influence. It turns it into what I call a military grade psychological weapon against people, not just with music, but with all entertainment. So that includes like corn on the cob that you eat at the cookout. So this can be applied to any other form of entertainment and infotainment or information, including the medias. It has been military grade psychological weaponized against the masses. I think it talks about in the Hebrews that these things are built with discernment. As you have said no, maybe even as you have the gifts accordingly, and deliberately kept that out of your life, you can tell when you listen to it in passing, like out somewhere else. You can hear what that is. You can hear what that spirit is and how it's just leading people astray. How if you listen, it's okay if you listen to it for a minute or two or heard it in passing or watched it or studied it. But if you turn that on regularly for entertainment, for a pastime, every time you're driving, if you let your mind never resist it and say there's something wrong there, like back in the day, even when I listened to that stuff, I would have a barrier about certain swear words or topics. I wouldn't even listen to that music. Now that I've paid attention to what I used to listen to more, I've thought the music that even used to minister to me was the spiritual songs and psalms. And I was always looking for a deeper spiritual meaning in them, which a lot of people do. But that all the time by itself is poison. And now, like when I hear it in passing, you can get this feeling and this understanding of how much poison it is to everyone on purpose. So, some people would laugh or scoff at that. And when people start laughing and scoffing, especially to a certain degree, that's how you know they know it's true. So I know what's true and peaceful for me and what I know with the Lord. So I also deeply sense and understand how wonderful, talented, brilliant, rewarded, awarded, and bragged on classic music, the classics especially, they were designed to destroy and to subvert entire populations. Like these very first bands were tied hand in hand with deep government projects. These things, like I say, were the whole culture is coming to like a revolution of these kind of things, like an understanding of them more and more. Like the Beatles was a government project. What? And it's like, yeah, and you would be surprised how many are still funded. And you're only funded and promoted not just because you went to a Diddy party, but because you shook the right hands, you let them put their influence into your art or whatever. Now, like I would say about 30 years ago, just like this study back in the 90s, you had some original artists, but anymore, especially the new things coming out, are probably handpicked, genetically bred, even cloned. Like it's bad. Now you just about, I would say you're just about not seeing anything original. And then these people that are promoted, like that's another thing the Diddy is showing us. It's showing a lot of things, but it's showing that what we're being entertained by is completely fake. It's not there in no way, shape, or form is it worthy of being rewarded or admired or looked up to. Like it got there by its own credit and merit. It got there by being at a Diddy party. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so, and I believe I'm supposed to teach and warn about these things. And I've been given many signs in my life that I'm supposed to teach and warn. I've had a lot of signs, not just 9/11 of 2020. Like in 2008 when I was first called and I felt hell deep in the earth for days. And I had to pray for that feeling to leave. And it is all very real. Like I had believed the Bible and hell, and I believed it was probably at the center of the earth or somewhere, even metaphysically at the spiritual realms. But whatever that was like was in the ground, and it was hell. And I could feel a lot of aspects of it, and it was pretty bad. And I could feel how it was coming up onto the earth and influencing everyone, and um, that it was down under our feet. Like I would be driving around in town, like my usual schedule, and I would notice all the cars, all of us, we were driving on top of hell. And I prayed. It was about 4 or 5 days of that. I said, yeah, this needs to go away. It's not going away. So I prayed to the Lord that He would take it away, and it wasn't long. 2 or 3 days it left. So that's just like one more thing I think I'm supposed to warn. And I'm supposed to teach and warn, and I don't do it enough. It's painful to realize that in mass, we are assaulted by campaigns, which are the sitcoms, the movies, the songs that advertise extremely destructive lifestyles. They are these things that we're casually watching for entertainment that give us a peaceful feeling and we're relaxed, and we watch them when we relax and we can laugh. And they even have this laughter that comes on the ha 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 on the show constantly. It was so funny. This was funny. That was funny. It's to keep you in this atmosphere of everything that they're showing at least is light and easy and fun. This is where the fun land is. This is where you come to have fun and relax. Live like they do. Look like everything is polished and kept clean and the nicest coordination of color to the max, because this is the example of how to live your life. And however, the lifestyles that they're advertising there lead people to unaliving themselves, chronic depression, addictions, drug use, abortions, constantly abortions, or broken homes, diseases, and it's nonstop advertisement that is normal. If you watch those shows, I know a lot of people when they're young and coming up, they watch the shows, and so in many ways they emulate to live their life like that. Whether it's purchasing the latest styles, looking the most manicured, the most updated, keeping your home super clean, constantly having a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and having your relationship look a certain way to everyone, and or whether it's the substance abuse that's advertised and laughed about and joked about on the shows, and the lifestyle, the loose lifestyle. So after watching those shows, the understanding is, well, if I live that lifestyle, I'm going to have a steady job. I'm going to be able to have a stable energy levels, mental state. For the most part, I may have the random emotional crisis that we can all laugh about, ha 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 ha, things we said to our friend, and it'll be okay, and we'll get through it, and the addiction won't come in and take over, or the the transmitted disease won't ruin our life on top of it, and all the harassment that we get from having to go through abortions and all that in the spirit. So anyway, you're thinking as a young person that if you, by and large in general, what's advertised to us by and large on those programs is if you live your life this way, you're going to have a pretty good life. That's how to climb up out of poverty and have a pretty good middle class or upper middle class life and be educated, respected, successful, and economically supported. Just everything was pretty good that way. In reality, the life that they are selling you, and thank God for so many humble people out there that see through aspects of it. Thank God. Not everybody falls for all of it. But the reality is living that kind of life is like the most emptiest, difficult. It will leave you stranded, broken, addicted, miserable, and separated from the power of God and the life of God, the hope, the peace, the joy. All that is gone. And no wonder they keep selling that to you because now they can sell you their pharmaceuticals now. It's like those are lies. Those are lies, big time. It's not just you. Once more, I'm not meanly, bitterly, angrily preaching. I'm giving you the permission that it's okay to know that that is pure lies and you can be free. That's truth. But that's what it gets. Sometimes it can be frustrating. And I feel like most of that is over. I think that's the weird part of this part of the update. I feel like most of what I'm covering that have been frustrating for so many people and caused so much damage, I feel like most of that's over. And we're about to go into the tribulation. It's weird that most of this is over now. Wow. So, but it could be discouraging to see that these campaigns that are advertising constantly to people, especially the young and impressionable, very destructive lifestyles, damaging spiritual death lifestyles to people, um, they're sold to us as normal and successful and healthy, strong, sane, moral, admirable, vibrant, joyful, free, and popular. And you know what, guys? The popular school system backs that up at every turn because it's not just the young adults sold this, it's the kids and the teenagers, and they have their version of it. And then they get together into schools and they reinforce it to each other. And so when someone tries to go out of line of the deadly lifestyle, they are picked on and pressured back into following the correct pathway. Now, most people have this criticism as far as saying they're trying to get us to spend money on certain things. They're not understanding that that part's true. That there's an aspect of those systems that are trying to keep you into capitalism and spending your money on stuff and thinking that that's hope and joy in life. Then there's the other aspect of they are spiritually trying to sell you something too that don't work, that's broke. And it's to the kids, and the kids get together, and by the time you're a young adult, you have this pattern of your entire childhood and teenage years were being peer pressured. So by the time someone's trying to peer pressure you that it's weak, unhealthy, unwanted, undesirable, and not sane and balanced to keep up with the latest this, that, and the other and live wicked lifestyles, basically, that's how you know that you're on the right path because you need to stay away from them. When an average young person tries to go in the world and live the way that they're shown on the TV, they're shocked when it doesn't match. I don't think they ever put it together, though, without spiritual teaching. They just are, I don't understand why it's not working. Why doesn't it match what I saw on the glossy TV screen and those wonderful sitcoms and those beautiful living rooms that were all neat and decorated and colored perfectly with the nice tailored clothing that was upper middle class budget? Like, why doesn't my life work like that? Why am I not rewarded? Why am I so depressed? Why am I having to do an abortion all the time? And they don't understand why this don't work. I have transmitted diseases now, you know. So they don't seem to make that connection. It's this military grade level, I was saying, the psychological warfare of this Tavistock mind control campaign that's being done against people. So that's part of where the Bible says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and that they will not leave it when they get older. And that can still be true if you're trying your best, even in horrible situations and when you don't know better, it can still be blessed with prayer, and perhaps the person will live a better life and come back to more truth when they're older. But most of the time, what we have by the time we've reached our generations, when we're training up a child the way they should go, is we're still putting them with the same peer pressure and the same influences. So we're not really training them up, and it's more and more difficult. And then we wonder, why have they left God, and why don't they have this truth in their, especially a whole another generation that's having a whole different experience. That Bible verse don't seem to quite be promised fulfilled as it should be, because there's these sneaky things that they are being trained up as much as possible into what I call the social and cultural Marxism and Satanism, basically. So I'm not blaming parents at this point. We're way past anything being within the realm of possible. And you go back 50 years and we're into decades of this mind control. And that explains the world that you see around you today that's very broken. This is not normal at all. So, as I have studied how these kind of evils will benignly enter the home and destroy people and relationships and children and lives and souls, you can remember that how wicked it was whenever people were trying to live right and do things good and normal, and the whole time they were not approved by their peers. They weren't cool or acceptable, and if they don't allow the mass destruction, just keep your mouth shut. Because a lot of people aren't confident about it. They don't have a gift of discerning it deep enough. They don't know. And if everybody's telling them you're wrong, then they feel, even like I say, that this is kind of like you have permission. You have permission to at least ask questions. You don't have to do what I'm suggesting. You can ask your own questions. You can read your own Bible, and you can figure it out for yourself. This is permission, because a lot of times, like myself, it's kind of like an insecurity. We're like, am I even right to do this? A lot of times, like they say in the study of narcissism, wisdom is too high for a fool. The people that are just in the world that are not going to be saved, they're going to reject you. They're not going to believe you when you say you were abused. They're not going to have this in-depth foresight, be able to see and comprehend and feel and know and care and ask questions, take their time, and they didn't set their life up in a way that they could. And no one's perfect at these things, but sometimes you just have to understand. Wisdom is too high for a fool. And that's your permission to walk away. So, for this study of the 90s, a lot of it started around, like I said, in the 1960s. It peaked in the 80s and 90s. That's when you had your Michael Jacksons and Madonnas showing up and your MTVs. The technology changes of the 90s allowed this entertainment sources that were already here and already corrupting to be mass produced, refined, controlled, and broadcasted more than ever. And guys, some of this might have been funded, researched, developed, and promoted by countries that are our enemies. I've wondered about that too. But I think a lot of it just came from what we're calling the deep states and the one the original groups who corrupted all of the nations together, like the Bible verse says that Satan will deceive the whole world. And we need to constantly be on guard of the way that he's doing that in our lives, deceiving the whole world. And so, when you bring in technology, you can mass produce, refine, control, and broadcast this everywhere to the internet and even straight directly into your 24/7 phones. In the 90s, classic rock peaked on the radio. 60% of the United States households had cable TV subscriptions. This is kind of like when the cable moved in. Like when it went 24 hours, they were trying to push in the subscription. And you're not cool. Your mom and dad's not cool if they don't have these toys. It's not cool. You're not cool. Isn't social peer pressure disgusting? To me, it's always been like, if you're telling me I've got to have a brand name or do this or that, I almost have to do the opposite now. I almost have to do the opposite, or you're turning me into you're turning me into a mind control puppet slave of you, and all the dumbness and all the damage and destruction that's going to come from that lifestyle. No, I'm not cool, and I'm not going to be cool. You go ahead and follow that cool pattern right off the cliff. That's what that is. So Madonna was most popular in the 90s. Michael Jackson was most popular in the 80s and 90s. MTV peaked in the 80s, just to let you guys know where the that agenda was pushed. The entertainment war has been especially raging since the 60s. It's not just a 90s study. In the 1990s, you had more like hip hop, electronic, and dance genres peaking. That was probably when you had the electronics to have that, to have those forms of entertainment best cultivated. The technical electronic aspect that was mentioned before. Religiousnews.com and pewresearch.com, no, pewresearch.org, they studied a particular change in professing believers in America in the 90s. And they said that from 1972 to 2021, when they studied those time frames, the 90s were special in that young Americans left faith overnight in the 90s. Isn't that interesting? And I think that was for a variety of reasons, a culmination of all the reasons. They also said it was from migration changed, and then you had the 60s influence catching up, and technology was surging. And I think you had a whole generational thing, period. It was just a whole generational shift. But how interesting that this is right on schedule. And it makes me wonder about this falling away that was prophesied in 2 Thessalonians 2:3. It says that people are going to be leaving the faith as one of the end time signs. There will be a great falling away from the faith. And it may mean that just in general, it's harder to find a pure, un infiltrated, unleavened. There have been a lot of different errors that have come into the faith with all this technology. Errors and errors. Lots of different little doctrinal splits. It's been a whole lot. And two, I see that as we're more divided than ever because the enemy has had all this time. He's had the maximum time to divide and plant seeds of doubt and seeds of false doctrine. And it's probably going to escalate exponentially into the new millennium. And is the 90s when this time began of a great falling away? That's a curious idea, possibly. So now we're into part two. The stage has been set in the 90s with tech and globalism for the third millennium, the 2000s. And I think that it was something like this that was planned, like I said, by the groups, the same one that planned World War One, Two, and Three. They were like, here's the 2000s. We know the cataclysm is coming, following the patterns of the flood and the creation and Jesus' life and Abraham, his time frame of when he sacrificed. He was supposed to sacrifice his son, and they knew the time frames and the genealogies, and Jesus' death, 33 A.D. However that went, they knew these. They knew that 2000s was getting really close to the 6,000 year time marker. Once we hit the 6,000 marker, then we're into the day of the Lord. That 1,000 years, the millennial reign of the Jubilee of the earth. And there's a cataclysm coming basically in a few decades. So they knew this was important, and their leader was telling them, here are your plans, basically. So they were having these agendas that we keep seeing in these forums and these economic meetings of this is going to be the goal for this decade, this will be the goal for that next decade, these political and economic goals. And why? If you think that these are well-meaning people and that they are genuinely just trying something good, and it's not spiritual, that it's all just economics and Machiavellian, and you have to ration, and somebody's got to do it, and it's not really evil, then why is it repeatedly unnecessary evil? The wars, like we're just going to plan this massive war. That's cool. We're not going to plan peace and prosperity. We're going to plan a world war, and mutilations and bombings and you know children and everything. I believe they had these plans for each decade, basically, and that's what led into us seeing these cycles. And that part I can see where it's not that necessarily that God didn't plan the seals that people did as much as he's taking them in their own devices. Their devices is, we're going to do this terrible takeover. And God said, no, it's the white horse, conquering and to conquer. And then they said, we're just going to take peace from the earth. And the Lord said, the second seal is opened. And then they're like, well, we're just going to do a great virus and bio and destroy economies and war people. And it's like the third seal is open, and the wheat, the barley, and the scales, and it is my glory. All of your, there's going to be evil plans, like the one who attacked me. But it's kind of like the Lord says, I'm going to let them do it to think that they're God. They're gonna sit there and be like, I'm God because I'm doing all these big things. In the meanwhile, God's like, this is my sign, my season, my horseman that I predicted thousands of years ago by my servants.